back for the final session block of today's discussions at LogiPharma for day one. And we are going to be looking at how to achieve an agile and transparent pharma supply chain and some of the key technologies that are really helping to do that. So we're starting with a live panel that's going to be kicked off with a presentation. And the purpose of this panel is to really look at widespread blockchain adoption. We're going to be looking at the PharmaLedger program, which is a really exciting program that we're going to see a little framing presentation on in just a moment. But we're going to be looking at key themes around whether certain degrees of blockchain understanding, we're going to take for granted, my apologies, a certain degree of blockchain understanding from you guys, the audience, and looking at further discussions around the PharmaLedger program, as I mentioned, following the introduction at last year's LogiPharma. We'll dig into some other cases, including the HyperTrust case, which is a really exciting one that the HyperTrust organization are going to be introducing here, and then looking perhaps into some standards and how pharma can be working together and with the authorities on this to really drive the adoption as well. So joining us in this panel, we have Dan Fritz, who's the domain architect of supply chain at Novartis and is also leading the PharmaLedger project. And we have Brian Thornley, who's an AVP with global supply chain with MSD, so the American MEC, and also a PharmaLedger member. We have René Kronenburg, who's an area manager for the EMEA regions within supply chain IT at AbbVie, also a PharmaLedger member. We have Himanshu Agarwal, who's a global supply chain logistics director of GSK, also a PharmaLedger member. And joining them, we have also Maria Palombini, who's a director of the Pharma Blockchain Initiative with the IEEE Standards Association. And last but not least, Andreas Goebel, who's a managing director of the aforementioned HyperTrust, who already have a really interesting, significant use case of blockchain adoption within the pharma space. So we'll be digging into things in a live panel context. First, if I could ask Dan, you already you've got your video on, if I could ask you to share your screen. We're going to be seeing a presentation from Dan, who's very kindly agreed to deliver a presentation for us and set a bit of context in terms of what PharmaLedger are and what these guys are doing. It's a really exciting project here. So Dan, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Will. You can see my screen and you can hear me?
We can indeed. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So thank you very much for this opportunity to warm up the panel discussion with a little introduction to PharmaLedger. I'm Daniel Fritz. I'm a supply chain domain architect at Novartis, but I'm also the industry project leader for PharmaLedger. Which I'm happy to tell you about today. The probably interesting to notice is, the few logos down here on the bottom left-hand corner. You see FPIA, the European Federation Pharmaceutical Industries and Alliances. You see the EU, and you see IMI. Now, IMI, the Innovative Medicines Initiative, is a public-private partnership. It's a joint undertaking between the FPIA and the European Union for health and medicine innovation. And it turns out that this is just a pretty good way for building a consortium, especially if we're looking at health innovation, medicine innovation, or specifically blockchain. Because the IMI projects are looking at projects that are too risky for any one project, that are too expensive for any one company, and that benefit from having public partners and expertise brought into the thing. And that's exactly what IMI brings us. So that's great. We'll mention that we're going on the assumption that you have some basic understanding of blockchain, which may be actually more than I have. I use, just very quickly, the 5 A's to remind myself what is a good blockchain use case? What are the benefits of it? And in that regard, the first A is asset. And you're familiar with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and things like this, but this can also be used to manage products, packages, and data, or it could be used to manage the data like credentials that you have in your wallet today, could be in your virtual wallet in the future. In terms of audit, we're in a regulated industry. So we have got kind of a super audit trail on steroids. It also supports stamping, certifying. We know who approved or entered something when, because everybody agreed to it, everybody validated it. There was a consensus mechanism that wrote it into history forever. So that's a good fit for the pharmaceutical industry. Automation, so removing non-value adding activities through smart contracts, or just eliminating these, or reducing them through creating, by leveraging standards and smart contracts. So this offers great potential. Anonymize, protecting people's privacy, especially with health data. We don't want to invade or injure people's privacy, which is and health information is, of course, very sensitive. And last but not least, all for one, one for all. This is not about any one company or consortium or central governance authority running and doing everything. It's about the ecosystem and being decentralized, and ideally all members benefiting from this. So that's your short blockchain primer, in case you haven't had one before. This is just a view, just kind of a vision, which we in the project, in the PharmaLedger project, have defined around what does end-to-end supply chain traceability look like. We said we better draw a picture, because otherwise we'll be going off in different directions. But there's just a few things that I want to call out to you here, from the bottom to the top. I mean, it's really about end-to-end. So in this case, we're talking about your supplier's supplier, all the way from the sourcing of the raw materials down through your production, your distribution, your quality release, through the healthcare providers to the patient. So it really is an end-to-end view on the process. And this is relevant not only for supply chain scenarios, but also for clinical trials and health data scenarios as well. And where's blockchain in this? Well, we have it up here on the top. I envision this as kind of a thin backbone that is connecting different data silos, and within your own organization, but also data silos across different organizations. So when you start to put these things together and connect these data silos, break them down, you can create new capabilities, which we don't necessarily have today. We can create new real-time abilities that on a single source of truth, trusted data, that opens up all sorts of potential opportunities for supply chain optimization and transformation. So that's what it looks like. It looks great, but how do you do such a thing? How do you actually get in that kind of to move forward and towards that vision? And that's what we have done with PharmaLedger. The project is 3 years. It's kicked off last January, so we're almost halfway through. We have 29 partners, including 12 top pharma companies. We have a resourcing from public and private, over 22 million euros. And we're focusing on 3 areas, which is supply chain, clinical trial, and health data. And of course, we're kind of focused on supply chain today. We have public partners, hospitals, universities. We have patient organizations. So we've taken a good and technical company. So we have the right skills to deliver on the objectives of the project, which are basically to develop a platform, a blockchain-enabled platform, and to prove the value of blockchain through some different use cases in these 3 focus areas. In addition, we're looking at putting in the governance behind it, ensuring the sustainability beyond the life of the project, and also addressing all of the regulatory, legal, and data privacy components. So, and in doing so, we're also not, this is not just us. We're trying to reach out. We're here today to share this with you and to engage, because the ultimate success of this depends not only on what the project delivers, but it will depend upon the understanding and the adoption of the broader ecosystem, which means you. These are the use cases that we have prioritized. We started last year with a prioritization exercise. which brought the number of potential use cases down from 100 to 8. In the supply chain area, you could see clinical trial or clinical supply, traceability. So this is for investigative product, usually where the manufacturer, the trial sponsor retains ownership of the product to the point that it's actually reaches the patient. Finished goods traceability, which is the commercial variant of that, of course, but which is a big topic of discussion. This is where ownership, of course, could change hands and offer some potential benefits in the future, like digital recall notifications or inventory management visibility. The next one is e-leaflet, but it's actually better known as electronic product information, or EPI. This is actually a digital version of the package insert or the leaflet, and it is a huge. I'm not sure I understand. Oh, there, my Siri woke up there. It's a big priority for regulators, for the EMA as well, and this is one of our most advanced use cases, which is we're hoping to start piloting actually later this year. And the last one here is anti-counterfeiting, which actually builds, or I say piggybacks, on the e-leaflet or EPI use case. Because if you're scanning a data matrix, you know the batch, you know the serial number, you know the expiry. There's a number of different checks that you can perform to increase the certainty in the authenticity of that product, including checking potentially authentication features remotely. So that's the kind of the scope. Where we're at is basically here in the middle of the second year. We're developing these demonstrators. We're looking at what kind of governance model we want to have or would best work. Light governance, lean governance, ideally. The one thing to call out, I think, is that everything that the project develops in terms of its solutions will be open source, royalty-free, and available for anyone. And we're also developing installation documentation, user documentation. So the idea here is ultimately to lower the barrier for adoption as much as possible. And next year, we will finish up these pilots. We'll have hopefully proven the value of these demonstrators, of these use cases. We'll have pursued them to maybe get close to productive utilization, that, setting it live, which is a big step, versus just innovation and research and action. And then also setting up the governance model and disseminating and communicating the results. So we want to come back here next year and let you know actually how we're doing and where we're at. So that was a short, I hope a short, introduction to PharmaLedger. You can definitely find out more. I think it's not only here in my background here, but it's also in the slides. So there we have regular newsletters and Twitter. You can follow us on LinkedIn, and also you can reach out directly through the contact or an email. Happy to engage and to talk more about the topic. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and back over to you, Will.
Great. But Dan, thank you very much indeed for the overview there, and just seeing that timeline. You really have a compressed period of time to do a huge amount. So hopefully we can help to raise the profile of some of this and drive some engagement with the audience. But we're all wishing the best of luck. It's great to see that you're doing things like ensuring this is open source as well. There's been a lot of discussion around collaboration earlier on today. I'm sure it will continue, but this is very much in the same spirit. So yeah, really great to see, and thanks for the overview there. Now, to dig into things a bit more, we're going to be opening things up to the panel here. And Brian, well, in fact, it makes sense to do a quick round of introductions. Dan, obviously, you've given us a quick intro in you and your role at Novartis, so fantastic. But maybe if we could go around the group and give a quick round of introductions as well, that would be excellent. So Brian, if we could start with you and your role at MST, that would be excellent.
Yeah, thank you, Will. So I'm Brian Thornley. I'm responsible for the digital strategy of Merck and MSD. I have a long supply chain background, but also working in manufacturing and commercial organizations. We have a program in MSD focusing on connectivity between plant to patient. So we're looking at all of our systems, processes, ways of working, from raw material supply all the way to the patient. How do we connect better? How do we get better visibility, make better decisions, and ultimately be able to move product to respond faster to patient needs? So that's really the areas of responsibility that I have.
Great, thanks very much indeed for the overview. René, if you could maybe give us a quick insight into you and your role at AbbVie, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Will. Yeah, I'm the regional supply chain BTS manager, which means that I have the overlook over all the systems that we use in the EMEA region, and especially working with the third-party logistic providers, all the integrations that we have with them, and making sure that they can work properly and that everything is secure, so all the cyber security is included in there. And then obviously a lot about PharmaLedger.
Indeed. Okay, great. Thank you very much indeed. Andreas, if you could give us a quick intro. Obviously, you're not involved in the PharmaLedger consortium, but we've been driving blockchain for a fair bit, for a fair while. So could you give us a quick introduction on you and your role also?
So Andreas Göbel, my name. I'm Managing Director at Hypertrust Data Care, which is a Camelot spin-off company. We are basically founded on the blockchain idea and specialized on solutions which support personalized healthcare. And before that, Camelot Group itself has a fairly long track record in decentralization and according projects and solutions. And coming from there, happy to contribute.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Maria, you're coming very much from a standards perspective. So could you give us a bit of an insight of you and your role?
Yes, delighted to be with you all. So I am Maria Palomini. I lead the healthcare and life sciences practice at the IEEE Standards Association. Our work is to collaborate with initiatives and alliances such as PharmaLedger to develop market-driven standards to drive responsible and pragmatic adoption of these technologies. So through the development of standards, we work with the market so that we have a proven agnostic solution. We're not beholden to any one platform in the use of the technology. Especially, we're doing a lot of great work in open source, because that seems to be the theme of the day in the healthcare life sciences domain, which is really critical. So our work is to work with all the entities, the alliances, the consortia, in order to really drive this adoption of these technologies.
Great, thank you very much. And last but by no means least, Himanshu, could you give us a quick intro on you and your role at GSK?
So thank you, Will. Delighted to be here. I am global process owner for our distribution side of things, and that includes warehouse, both manufacturing and commercial warehouses. So all our 3PL warehouses across the network. And I also look after the sales from our factories perspective. Also, close to heart is, we are exploring the emerging technologies, things like IoT, RPA, and of course, blockchain. So I represent, I lead PharmaLedger initiative from a GSK perspective. And as I said, I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you, Will.
Great, great. Thank you very much indeed. That's a round of intros, guys. So let's jump into this. And yeah, maybe if we could start with you, Brian, your perspective from MSD. As Dan has shown, and as I think, as it's been shown universally, blockchain is very much now alive and kicking, and it's shown its true value in a number of different verticals. It's really starting to show its value within the pharma space as well. But it does require a very different approach. So could you unpack this approach, what it requires, how it differs perhaps from other kinds of digital technology implementation that people might be familiar with?
Yeah, thanks, Will. So I think, first of all, I would say that the core design elements for blockchain solutions are the same as anything else. You need to define scope, user stories, the outcomes that you're looking for, and develop the technology, test it, etc. So these kind of technology build capabilities, whether you use a waterfall approach or an agile approach, they're the same. What makes blockchain really different is the things that Dan mentioned in his earlier discussion, the ability to connect and create visibility in a trusted network that actually could be standardized and made available right across the world to communicate, pass information, keep records of what has been agreed, what has been decided, what has been shared, and what is available. This is what really makes it tremendously exciting. And then layered on top of that, the power of being able to make decisions. Again, Dan mentioned the idea of smart contracts. Smart contracts basically means to have logic built into the blockchain that allows truth decisions to be made. If A equals B, then C, and to kind of lock those down so that there's really no room for human error or interpretation. It's really a very factual kind of way of working. What does that mean for us in the pharmaceutical industry? Well, quite simply, we believe, I think all of us on this panel, but certainly all the people working on the PharmaLedger program, believe that we can transform the external pharmaceutical supply chain. We can change the paradigm from what we have today to something completely new for the future. New in terms of better visibility, shared information, faster decision making, the ability to connect the partners in a way they've never been able to connect before. And this is really A, transformational, but B, offers huge challenges because it really challenges so many of our existing paradigms, the roles of each of the players, how we work with each other, the information that we share, the level of trust that we have with one another. All of these things are challenged through blockchain. And so, when I think about the dimensions, of course, there's that dimension of building technology, understanding the capabilities that you need. There's the dimension of geography. Are we doing some work in Europe? Are we doing some work in Asia, in Singapore, in Hong Kong? Where are we working? We have to deal with the local environment and what is out there to connect to. We have to think about the products. What are the products we're managing in pharmaceuticals? Are we managing small molecule products, cold chain products, CAR T products? Each of these things has different requirements that need to be considered as well. But I think most importantly is the ecosystem. We need to bring together players from, of course, the industry, of course, wholesalers and distributors, of course, clinics and pharmacists, but also the regulators, the governments, the customs clearance houses, and even the patient. And the great thing about blockchain is we can create a single backbone, a digital superhighway that allows us to exchange information, make decisions more rapidly, have that visibility. But we can do more than that. We can really, if we can find ways to collaborate, if we can find ways to compromise on our traditional views, opinions, paradigms, then we can truly transform. And so, let me finish by saying it's about the collaboration and being prepared to compromise on what we want as different organizations in the pharmaceutical supply chain. If we can do that, then we can find ways to make this technology work. And maybe one last point. I still hear people say that blockchain is a technology looking for a solution. This is absolutely not true. We have got some tremendous user cases. There are so many areas that we can transform and drive improvement for the patient through blockchain technology. It's really just about us coming together and collaborating across these dimensions.
Got you. And before we move on to perspective from the other panelists, and thanks very much for laying this out. It's really exciting. There are examples out there that are really starting to drive traction from other verticals, from other industries. And so, are you able to give any examples of examples of this working, and perhaps some lessons that we can learn from that and apply to the picture that you're painting for the life sciences space?
Yeah, I think there are, there's some quite well-known examples out there. I think one of the oldest now is in the tulip industry in Amsterdam, where the bulbs are actually grown in Africa and transported into the Netherlands for planting and growing into tulips. And they have big problems with obviously perishable materials getting stuck in Rotterdam port. And losing significant yields of the transported product. So a blockchain solution was put in place to allow that customs clearance and free movement of goods across the borders through a blockchain solution, which has proved to be incredibly successful. I think another big example, well-known example probably, is De Beers. Trying to tackle the challenges of blood diamonds and being able to track and trace the authenticity and the source of the diamonds. Another great example. But I think we have now some really great examples that are coming together from within our own industry. MSD has been working very closely with Bayer, with LogiPharma and with SAP in Hong Kong as a kind of a garage, a kind of pilot market where we have built the track and trace capability for a few key critical cold chain vaccines and other products, tracing those products through Singapore into Hong Kong, giving the clinic the opportunity to validate that the product is genuine, but more than that, to be able to communicate to the clinician and to the patient with the clinician through the blockchain. We're, as Dan said, experimenting right now with the electronic leaflet in Singapore. Many of the companies involved in PharmaLedger are also working on that experiment in Singapore. And of course, the ones that Dan mentioned in Europe itself. And in the US, a number of us are looking at blockchain technology to meet the track and trace capabilities for legal requirements for the US market. And right now, I can tell you that Merck, in collaboration with all of the major vaccine suppliers for COVID, are discussing how we could leverage blockchain to help with COVID vaccine distribution, to ensure that the second dose especially is always available for patients, and to be able to guarantee product integrity when we know that there are high risks of counterfeit medicines when we think about COVID. So there are many examples now that are out there, real examples.
Great, and yeah, looking forward to digging a bit further into some of these examples. Yeah, you mentioned EPI, anti-counterfeiting, supply chain traceability. I'll try and dig into these a little bit more over the course of this discussion. But yeah, thanks very much for setting the scene there and giving a few examples. Andreas, maybe if we could move on to you. Brian mentioned, among many things, CAR-T products and specialized medicines as an application for this. And I know you guys are Hypertrust of smaller scale, but a proven use case of the technology being used within this highly personalized context. So could you tell us a little bit more about the work that Hypertrust are doing and the work that you've been driving there?
Yeah, sure. Before talking about that small scale case we have with our French customer Transgene, maybe let me step back a bit and look at our core motivation and what is our core vision of our Hypertrust Patient Data Care company. And that's basically that we have seen a pretty good use case for blockchain. And that was mentioned already before by Brian, as he mentioned CAR-T and with that cell and gene therapies. So looking at, our main value we are bringing to pharma is currently a cell and gene therapy orchestration platform. And what use case is behind that? So I phrased that in just one sentence, and it's an excellent description of a very good decentralized blockchain use case, by the way. It's about managing cross-company and sometimes cross-country workflows with tight time dependencies and many involved people and handovers to modify an unstable raw material towards an as well unstable final pharmaceutical product. So you can see all these things which are involved in that one sentence. That this is bringing in all the angles which you normally look at when you're seeking for a good blockchain use case. And we did a proof of concept with that, implemented it fully decentralized with good results, both in terms of improvement of turnaround times and also in terms of throughput, which was manageable in that sense. But still we had to go back one step because most of our potential customers in that field are still in clinical trials, right? And companies that are fiddling around with clinical trials don't want to go down the road of consortia building and overhead and things like that. So that was the reason why that orchestration platform can be operated both decentralized but also lean, centralized in a cloud stack as well. And this is what we basically implemented for several customers for clinical trials. And again, we identified a small scale blockchain use case, which is basically the trust chain between a pharma company and a service provider like we are, and infrastructure providers when you're looking at cloud solutions, right? So, and the core of that thing is an audit trail, right? So the audit trail has to be made in an immutable way. And it's the duty of the pharma company to guarantee that. But how should that be guaranteed if that is operated by a service provider and that service provider even involves an infrastructure provider, right? So the pretty low-hanging fruit solution is basically opening a small blockchain network, distributing it across these parties just mentioned, and there you have for that situation a very good solution for an immutable audit trail in a GMP validated environment. And this is exactly what happened at Transgene.
Got you. And Dan mentioned earlier on, with PharmaLedger, the compressed time frame they're looking to achieve a huge amount within. You've faced a similar situation whereby you're trying to really establish blockchain activities in as quick a method as possible. So how is it that things can be sped up from your perspective? How is it that you've been able to improve the speed of the scale up and the implementation of these technologies?
Well, for speeding up that thing, it's a complex topic. Looking at the technology, of course, many things are there, but of course, you don't need everything for every use case. That's also an important thing. We've seen so many blockchain projects being started, and they all had a hassle with what do I really need? What does blockchain bring in the end to such a situation? What additional components do I need? Which trust requirements do I have at all? Do I have trust requirements in certain angles, and what do I need for that? And basically that is key a bit, so that people understand what is the process of building a distributed trusted system, I would say. It's first of all, manage your requirements, just see which trust do I need, which parties do I need. Most important, of course, start with the organizational perspective of your ecosystem. Just understand your ecosystem, and from the ecosystem, then build the consortium which involves all required parties early on, in order to get started with the proper concepts, with the proper people. So that if you set it up like that, you are well set. And from there, it's all mainly about maybe not inventing the wheel again and things like that. But with that organizational structure, you are well set to speed up things.
Right, okay. And yeah, final thing I was keen to ask you just in this section here, and it applies to the rest of the panel here as well. So keen to hear your perspectives. Is what are the key lessons learned from proof of concept and the productive implementations when we start to look at commercial scale and supply chain, the area that the PharmaLedger is very much involved in. So just starting with you, Andreas, what also are the key differences and therefore challenges associated with this commercial scale?
Well, for the commercial scale, I see this quite clearly in our use case as well, looking at the personalized healthcare. One of the main problems coming from trials, then going to commercialization, is of course patient data. So it's a quite comfortable situation with that consent in the back to work on the data in a clinical trial environment, but it's a completely different ballpark in a commercialized setup. And there are many discussions going on about what to do with person-related data and especially patient-related data in these contexts. And of course, latest there, you need an additional component. A blockchain alone can't help here. It's even an obstacle. And In terms of scalability, I mean, our use case is quite thankful for that. So what we realized is that even with the HyperLedger Fabric platform, which is not the fastest thing on earth, we could manage 50,000 personalized therapy records per day, which is way more than will happen in the next 10 years to come.
Gotcha. And yeah, any other points from you guys involved in the PharmaLedger? Anything you wanted to add here in terms of the key differences that you're seeing in clinical trials, application of the technology versus commercial scale supply chain? Yeah, anything that you wanted to add here? No problem. Okay, great. Well, we can move on to some use cases in that case. And I come to you, Himanshu. Moving on, it's the work that you're driving at GSK, obviously in parallel with the other major producers in the consortium that Dan outlined. It would be really great if we could dig into some of these use cases and those that you're piloting. So it would be great to maybe if we could start with the EPI and my apologies, e-leaflet. It's a bit of a tongue twister, that one. At GSK, could you give us a bit of an oversight of what's being driven there?
Sure, no, absolutely. Thank you, Will. The first thing I would like to call out is, I think all of the consortium partners, especially the pharmaceutical world, right? Majority of us would have been looking into this EPI work stream as to how do we digitize the paper leaflet, the 1,000 pages that we open whenever we open a carton and pull out a piece of paper, right? Majority of the times we will check it in the bin without even reading it. But that's a regulatory requirement because of good reasons as to when you need to read it, right? So every company, pharmaceutical company, was anyways exploring how to digitize that in a much user-friendly way, not a PDF version of the same document. And therefore, this consortium helps us to, again, keeping the patient or the consumer at the end of the supply chain in focus. How can we simplify their life? Because when I consume a drug or a pharmaceutical product, I don't care whether it's a GSK product or a Novartis product or a MSD product. This is the drug that my doctor prescribed me, and so I consume that. So irrespective of which company is manufacturing, can we homogenize this EPI or the patient information in such a way that it becomes easier for the consumer or the patient to access that information when they need to access it? But also then that opens up opportunities for many more use cases. If a patient wants to scan a drug, using the 2D matrix that's on the carton of the drug, could we do some kind of other checks like anti-counterfeiting check? Or could we propose to the patient as to, hang on, you have been consuming some other drug, which might or could prompt as to there might be counteractive reactions or whatnot. So it kind of opens up a digital channel directly to the consumer, but at the same time makes the information available to them in a much more user-friendly manner. So that's EPI. On the back of EPI, we can of course run the anti-counterfeiting check. So when a consumer is scanning that, we could check whether the product is in the right country, for example, and therefore has reached that market through the legitimate supply chain, and it's not a counterfeit product. And of course, we'll take the consent of the user to run that anti-counterfeiting check. But on the back of it, again, taking advantage of the blockchain, anonymization of the data and other principal key features, can we do some analytics on that data as to from an anti-counterfeiting perspective, and then share it with our regulators and the pharma industry as to, it could be in a particular region, in a particular month, you see a spike in some kind of an anti-counterfeiting activity or counterfeiting activity. So those are the kind of insights we're looking to build from an EPI and anti-counterfeiting perspective. And as Brian mentioned, we are piloting something in Singapore. Again, MSD, GSK, Pfizer, and quite a few other industry partners working with the local authorities there to see how best we can pilot it.
Right, okay, gotcha. So yeah, it's EPI and anti-counterfeiting and the traceability side of things as well. How does that factor into well, if you've got any use cases of the traceability, how are things developing on that side?
Sure. Today, majority of us operate in kind of our silos. So just to build upon that, if I have a product within my organization, I am in full control whilst the product is within my supply chain. I know exactly where it is, what temperature it is stored in, etc., right? So we are in full control. But as soon as that product leaves our supply chain and moves to the next downstream supply chains, so to the distributor, to the to the hospitals, etc., we kind of lose the traceability of it. So one of the aspects of the supply chain traceability use case is, can I break the silos of information that exist today? And therefore, instead of looking at GSK supply chain or Pfizer supply chain or MSD supply chain, could we look at the supply chain of that product end to end? Whether it's with the manufacturer, whether it's with the distributor or a wholesaler or a retailer, doesn't matter. But because as a consumer, I want to look at the holistic, and therefore it allows us to do quite a few neat things in the background. Exchange data, reduce the infrastructure cost actually, because rather than having point-to-point interfaces with everyone, right, in the whole network, if by having that PharmaLedger kind of a fabric, we reduce the overhead of all the IT infrastructure. We kind of get better visibility to demand signals potentially. If I can have a visibility of what is my stock levels at a hospital, which buys from a retailer our products, can I already predict what's coming up in terms of demand sensing? So there are quite a few use cases that could be built upon the traceability, but the minimal viable product that we're looking at as a part of PharmaLedger, going live sometime later this year, is proof of concept, is on recalls. So today, if I have to issue a recall, I do it to my first downstream partner, and then they take care of their further downstream participants. Can I broadcast a message to the entire supply chain through the PharmaLedger kind of a fabric, so that everyone, and even if we connect it to the API, the app that I mentioned earlier on for the user, if there was a recall message issued, could upon scan the user be flagged that this might be it might be marked for a recall. So that's the traceability use case, and these are the three key use cases within the supply chain for the PharmaLedger that we are actively participating on.
Great. Well, thanks very much for the overview there, for providing a bit of context. Hopefully it's starting to make this, the application of this technology far more real in the eyes of the audience. We can really see how you guys are really harnessing it. So thanks for unpacking that, Himanshu. Really appreciate it. Maria, maybe if we can move on to you, and could you give us a little color on the work that you and the IEEE are doing within this field and what you're looking to achieve, how standards are fitting into this picture?
Sure. So first of all, I'm delighted to hear about all these use cases that is going on, because I think this is something we've been talking about quite a while. When I originally joined the IEEE SA, most of my work was around blockchain in the pharmaceutical and life science industry. And since then, obviously, the role of blockchain now has become a little bit more complex as you integrate other technologies with it, which a lot of the conversation we've had today hasn't really focused on that, but it is a critical element, right? We can't look at blockchain as a silo. So part of the work we do at the IEEE Standards Association is, and just to mention, is that we have standards projects currently by domain and by technical discipline. So by that, we have, blockchain and application of the agriculture supply chain, which is very comparative, as we see from a regulatory, obviously, tracking perspective. We have blockchain in healthcare and life sciences, which we cover the pharmaceutical distribution chain. We look at the clinical trial supply chain. We look at clinical trial patient recruitment. We have many incubator programs and decentralized clinical trials, which looks at the combination of blockchain and AI, blockchain and IoT, blockchain and quantum. I mean, we're covering the whole gamut. And then you look at actually the technical discipline, where we look at the actual blockchain asset blocks and looking at standards just like that across every domain. So the whole point of this is to really start to if I may use this term, by having the market collaboratively work on these projects, we're starting to put credibility around the use of these technologies. But as well, we work with the regulatory authorities on these actual standards projects. They're participating in them, so that when it comes time and they're reviewing all these different applications, not only are they aware, but they have the ability to understand and write guidance or policy, if necessary, into it. And this is what sort of makes the idea that we don't put the responsibility on one set of shoulders. By that, I mean, it's not the industry who has to solve the problem. It's not regulatory has to write a policy. It's not, some other research group has to find the answer. It's that collaboratively, we're developing the solution that's going to drive the adoption of the technology. It's getting the industry to buy in. And this is really critical. And so all the work we've heard today, you look at it from an individual perspective, GSK is doing this and Hypertrust is doing this, but really they're all doing it together, and the work is to bring it all in. And from a standards perspective, many have argued that standards sort of sometimes may be what we might call blocking innovation, but instead standards is what's actually going to open the door to innovation by getting the problems, like the foundational problems, out of the way. You know, and I think that's really critical. So I think I want everybody to think about, you know, and I think, you know, Brian started saying, so how do we create a standardized way of doing this? Well, if we take the best practices and the, you know, the learnings from each of these individual pilots and proof of concepts and alliances and consortia and put them all together, we can actually start to standardize those challenges, put them out of the way so that we can really push open the door and really see what this technology can do for the industry. And that's what our role is.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much for the overview there. Andreas, I saw you passionately nodding your head amidst Maria's points there. Is there anything that you wanted to add before we come back to the producer perspective and start looking at, you know, the future potential of this technology as well? Anything you wanted to add here?
Sure, I would just like to double, Maria, very good point. Even if we are looking at the personalized healthcare space, so just 2 years ago, all the field was asking for standardization, and this was about the process standardization in personalized healthcare itself. But if you think as a blockchain network, which is an enabler, which is standardized by itself on a technical level for a standardization on the higher pharma level, that is also a very important aspect to look at. So if you need standardization on the higher level, and you can just enable it by being standardized on a technical level, that's the big strength also of that decentralization approach, to my opinion.
Okay, gotcha. Thanks indeed. Now, moving forward, it'd be great to kind of start to look at you know, not just what's being done currently, but what the potential of this technology is in the near future. And René, I know AbbVie are heavily involved in this technology as well. You guys are obviously very active members of the PharmaLedger consortium. Are there any additional strategic initiatives, you know, to those outlined by Himanshu in terms of, you know, the current use cases and pilots within the scheme that you're involved in terms of looking at the potential of this technology, and maybe you could unpack where you believe that, you know, the blockchain is going, what you believe its potential is?
Thank you for that question, Will. Well, first of all, the potential of blockchain is actually also the potential of collaboration, if you ask me. And one of the things that we have set up almost instantly after setting up PharmaLedger is something that's called the Blockchain Consensus Board, where we all work together as pharma companies, and these are a lot more companies than just the PharmaLedger associates, where we actually work together and see where we can actually collaborate on new projects and see how we can really make that happen. And yeah, that's really, I think, the most important thing about blockchain, the ability to collaborate easily. One of the initiatives we are looking at now, for instance, is we all have these peer-to-peer connections with our third-party logistics warehouses. And this is very inefficient because a lot of us working with the same third-party logistics providers. So if we can actually centralize that to one point, and we all have peer-to-peer to one point, where we actually then distribute it to the different logistics providers. So all work, for instance, with UPS, with DHL, with Movianto, with HSers, you name it. So if we can actually just have a peer-to-peer connection with one party who then can, in a completely secure environment, then distribute that data to the right logistical partner, then we have a huge cost saver. We will be much more flexible, but there is also a whole data pool coming available for all of us to actually analyze what is happening there, and how can we learn from this data? How can we consolidate freight? How can we be more effective in our whole supply chain? And so, yeah, there is countless ways of improving via this trusted environment. So it's really exciting if you start to think of it, and every new idea where more parties actually could work together, is enabled through blockchain. That's my vision.
Sure, that's great. So yeah, I mean, the potential is absolutely enormous, evidently. I mean, in terms of the roadmap and how the collaborative effects of the activities you've outlined, you and the panel have outlined here. Does that lead to unlocking the door to further initiatives? Do you have a roadmap beyond the end of 2022 and the end of the PharmaLedger? What does that?
Yeah, actually, we always said from the beginning that PharmaLedger is not a 3-year project and then ends, and actually PharmaLedger is a 3-year project to start something, to actually start this all these collaborations and really do things in real life and make advantage in a lot of different ways. Patients will definitely be the big winners here with all this anonymized data that we can exchange. It's incredibly valuable, and there is so many different applications for that. I think we can build on this for many years.
Certainly, great. Well, yeah. Wishing you all the best, and it's great to hear that view that the end of 22 is the end of the beginning for this technology, and the PharmaLedger project is just launching something in the industry that hopefully has great longevity. And maybe if we could just finish off this part of the panel, where we started with you, Dan. Obviously, you're leading the consortium in tandem with your role at Novartis. So, I mean, could you give us an idea of the optimal goal of the project and the legacy that you're trying to achieve through these activities? René, unpacked it a little bit there, but if you've got any more of a sort of crystallized picture of what the optimum place that you'd like to be, in 18 months' time or whatever it might be.
Yeah, the vision and the ultimate impact of PharmaLedger is something which is actually we have to describe as part of the whole project approval process. That's going to take several years. It's a journey to achieve, right? This is even if we're moving fast, it's going to take some time. I think the optimal solution, or the optimal position, would be a productive solution by the end of the project, because that addresses many, if not all of the goals of the project in one. I mean, if it's productive, it really, we need to have a separate kind of a governance organization around it. If it's productive, we're going to need to have the regulatory, legal, data privacy, all of those compliance things checked. If it's productive, then it's real finally. We're not just talking about it, but it's actually, we've got now a consortium solution that brings value. So it really then addresses all of the objectives of the project, and I don't think it's easy, but I think we can do it, and I think we can do it, and if we can do it, then I think that kind of the dam will break, and all of us, there'll be then we won't be searching for use cases or searching for partners. We'll be implementing and rolling out and scaling at that point. So that's actually the I think optimal position, and like in terms of a legacy or something like this, I think all you have to do is put yourself in the position of a patient, and which should be easy because we've all been patients, right? And just wonder, actually, where is my health record? I don't know. I've got a file cabinet here. Most of it's bills, but my health data is spread across a number of different doctors' offices or hospitals or things like this. And I think we paid for that data, but I don't have it. And if I'm going to take a medicine, I should be able to trust I should be able to navigate the information on it. I should be able to add it to my health record in one button. These are obvious benefits for patients to have all of their data, to have the information, and to have the control of it. And I think everybody wouldn't argue with having that as a great achievement. So hopefully we can accelerate that journey with PharmaLedger and with the collaboration that is so essential to make it happen.
Great. Well, certainly hope so as well from this side. one final question before we're going to go to a poll question in a moment, just to understand where adoption is across the industry. But yeah, a lot of people tuning in at the moment, so we're going to be finding out where they're at in terms of their blockchain adoption journey. But just for those that are listening in, maybe if I could ask you this Brian, or Dan also, I'm sure you've got, in fact, I'm sure we all have some ideas in this, but for those, we're seeing loads of questions coming in, like, how can I get involved in this? Like, how is it, where do we start in terms of this? There's a whole bunch of questions coming through the Q&A function here. So look, for those that, regardless, for key stakeholders elsewhere in the supply chain, whether they might be producers or other key stakeholders who are assessing this technology and what it can do for their business and for the industry as a whole, like, what advice might you give to organizations that are looking at this and trying to understand how to actually, to best apply? I know you began, Brian, with saying, it's certainly not a technology that's looking for a for a use case, and we've seen examples of that. But Brian, maybe I could ask you first. Like, would you have any advice for those? Yeah, that are asking?
A couple of things. First of all, I would encourage anybody who sees an opportunity for a user case, you have to be bold and reach out to the partners that you want to work with and bring them together and try to align on a coordinated vision of the future. And nothing is stopping you from doing that. Just get on with it. In terms of the industry, there are two pathways forward that I would encourage industry companies to consider. First of all, at the global level, we have created what we're calling a blockchain consensus board. We meet, there are about, I think, 14 companies now that are involved with this, certainly all the major pharma companies represented here today. And we're meeting once every quarter. And looking together at where are the opportunities to collaborate, to change the paradigms, and to help to create projects. It's not a governance group. It's more of a kind of a collaboration advisory group where we are just trying to help to connect people together, share work that's being done. I mentioned earlier the work that we've been doing with Bayer. And now through the Blockchain Consensus Board, we're inviting other pharma companies to participate with that as well. So it's a forum where we can share, collaborate, and expand ideas. And then, of course, PharmaLedger itself. PharmaLedger is running now, and but nevertheless, I think there are opportunities, of course, for people to get connected, to hear what's going on, to be actively monitoring, watching, and potentially to be involved in some of the experimentation later on. I'll let maybe Dan speak more to
that. In terms of getting involved or getting engaged, I think, if you haven't done something, then it's time to start this. I think this is a journey. It's a learning process. It's I think the same process that we went through, doing our proof of concepts and then saying, okay, great, it works, but it doesn't do anything unless I get some more external manufacturers on this, and distributors and wholesalers. So you have to go through this learning process. You have to understand what the value is. I mentioned, in terms of engagement, we have 29 members. We're pretty well staffed and resourced, but we're looking at piloting. And so if people believe they could get engaged or potentially, please go to the pharmaledger.eu, let us know. And if we can have the capacity to run additional pilots or expand the pilot, I think that would be feasible. We had, I think I saw the question in the QA, we've already talked to JERP about engaging with different logistics providers for our traceability use case. So no reason why not to inquire if it makes sense.
Great. Well, thanks for that. I think that's a very good way to leave things. The time is now. This is a technology suite that is absolutely proving its use and proving its worth. And it's been really excellent to have all of you involved. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time and for really explaining some of the really exciting use cases that there are within the space. So Dan, Brian, René, Himanshu, Maria, and Andreas, thank you all very much indeed for joining. It's been great to have you involved.
Thank you very much.
Just to,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.